Welcoming those members of the public and press who've joined us today for this extraordinary meeting of the Cabinet. With two important issues to consider at today's Cabinet meeting, but before we begin the formal meeting, I have some housekeeping for you. First of all, be aware that the meeting is live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's website. Second, the Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and post to social media during the meeting. Third, can I ask everyone to turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. And I'll just make sure that mine is off. Indeed. And finally, in terms of housekeeping, the fire alarm has just been tested, so we're not expecting another one today. If it does, please proceed to the nearest marked fire exit and to the fire assembly point. Item 1, apologies for absence. Dan, would you be kind enough to say, are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Leader. None received.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosable interests? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'll take that as no. Item 3. Item 3 is a report on the Peterborough draft local plan and can be found on pages 3 to 198 in today's agenda. And Councillor Thulborn, Cabinet Member for Growth and Regeneration, will you be kind enough to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Leader. Through you. Peterborough is one of the fastest growing cities in the UK, and we have in place policies to help guide future growth and development to 2036. However, we need to produce a new local plan to take into account changes to national policy, the new mandatory housing needs requirements to ensure the council can maintain a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, ensure a sufficient supply of future employment land to attract new businesses, jobs and opportunities to Peterborough while supporting existing businesses, and to meet our climate change ambitions. The first stage of public consultation took place in summer 2023, and at this early stage the issues and options document did not identify the precise sites required to deliver the housing and jobs growth targets. As part of this earlier consultation process, the Council asked the public, developers, landowners, agents and parish councils to suggest sites for future housing, employment provision that are available and deliverable. All suggested sites have been assessed against a detailed assessment criteria, and the preferred sites have been included in the draft plan and shown on the draft policies map. This has involved a huge amount of time and analysis by the planning team. I am pleased to present the draft local plan to Cabinet. It sets out proposals that will set the overall vision and objectives that will guide future decision making and identifies the broad distribution and areas for growth. It sets out how the city and surrounding villages will grow and change over the next 20 years. This is a draft plan that you're asked to approve for public consultation. I am mindful, however, that since the papers were published, the draft local plan has been discussed by the Planning and Environmental Protection Committee, and I am sure Cabinet colleagues would welcome an update on these discussions and any feedback the committees has provided. I'm also mindful that the draft local plan will be discussed later today by the joint scrutiny committees, and I also think it would be helpful for Cabinet to hear the comments before making a final decision on this consultation document. I therefore propose, if colleagues are agreeable, that we take this item in stages by inviting Gemma Wildman to briefly explain the background to the document, site assessment process and the consultation process. I would then welcome if Jenna could provide us with a summary of the discussions at last night's Planning and Environmental Protection Committee. I then suggest that we adjourn consideration of this item and debate about it until we have had the chance to hear the outcome of the Joint Scrutiny Committee's discussions. As I understand it, it would be possible for us to reconvene on Monday to make a final decision about the consultation of the draft local plan. So if colleagues are agreeable, that would be my suggestion. Thank you, Leader.
Do we have agreement for Gemma to update us? Okay. Gemma, would you be kind enough to update the committee, please, the Cabinet, please?
Thank you, Sir. I've just got
fairly short presentation just to go through to provide you with a bit of background and update. And yeah, the screens do work this time. So as you're all aware, the current local plan was adopted in July 2019 and sets the growth targets to 2036. The plan is now 5 years old and is required to be reviewed. Since the plan was adopted, there's been, as was mentioned, there's been several changes to national policy, lots of new legislation such as biodiversity net gain, climate change. We've had a new government bringing in new changes to the planning system, and also the introduction of the new mandatory housing target. So this slide shows the current timetable, approved end of February. It's a statutory requirement that the plan has to be prepared in accordance with the timetable, but this highlights the different stages that the plan has to go through, and to show that we're still at quite an early stage of the process. So as is mentioned, the issues and options consultation was carried out in summer 2023. We're currently at the draft stage. This is the opportunity for people to see the first draft of the policies and proposed sites. There'll be public consultation taking place in the spring. There'll then be a period for the team to review all the comments that are received, take those into account, to review the document, review the evidence base, and they'll prepare a proposed submission version that will be brought back to Cabinet to approve and full council. This will be the version that the council would like to see adopted as the plan for the Peterborough. That will be consulted for 6 weeks, and following the consultation, the planning policy team will review all the comments, collate the comments, but we don't deal with those comments. We submit the plan, all the supporting evidence-based documents, and the comments to government, who will appoint an independent planning inspector. The planning inspector will hold a public examination and will invite anybody with outstanding objections to attend and make their representations to the inspector. Following that, the inspector will issue a report which sets out what, if any, changes are required to make the plan sound. Those changes have to be made by the council, and then it comes back again to full council to approve the plan for adoption. And that's due to happen in December 2026, so it's still quite a lengthy process to go through. As I mentioned, we carried out the consultation on the issues and options document to help guide us what people would like to see in the new plan, and what the priorities should be. We published a report summarising those issues. We also carried out a call for sites, and all suggested sites were published so people could see what land was being assessed and what land was available potentially for development. So as I mentioned, there's been quite a few changes since work began on the local plan. At the start of last year, when we were looking at sites, this was based on the target of 936 homes a year. In the summer, government proposed to increase that to 1,068, and the consultation on the draft plan was paused to take account of these changes. When the final guidance came out just before Christmas, the figure still increased, but by not as much as we'd expected, to 1,006. This results in a need for 20,120 new homes by 2044. The bottom of this slide just puts a few sort of notes so people are aware. So the currently adopted local plan target is 982 dwellings per year, so slightly under. And since the base date of the current local plan, the average delivery rate has been 110 dwellings per year. So you can see that our delivery rate matches that, and it's a realistic target for us. So the draft local plan includes draft policies that we'd like to see to be carried forward to be used in determining planning applications. This is a list of some of the key policies here. The Cabinet report does provide a very brief summary of each of those policies that people can read through, and I won't go through all those in detail. But just to highlight where there's been some main changes would be around climate change, taking into account new requirements for that. Changes to housing needs policy, particularly with the government changing the emphasis for social rent homes, and town centres, but due to changes to how town centre uses are classified, and again changes with natural environment and the introduction of biodiversity net gain and requirements for different types of green infrastructure. So this slide shows you all the sites that were suggested to the council as part of the call for sites. All these sites have been assessed against the detailed site assessment criteria. So you can see there's a wide range of sites for different uses across the area. So the minimum target is 20,120 homes, but at the 31st of March, 172 dwellings had the benefit of planning permission, And there's a number of existing local plan allocations that are available and suitable to be carried forward. So these are sort of sites that are known, and some of them have planning applications in anyway. That means that what's required as completely new sites to be identified through the local plan is just over 6,000 dwellings that we'll be looking to assess. So that's for housing. For employment land, we've commissioned consultants to carry out a employment needs study. This sets a need for 2,005 hectares of industrial and warehousing land and 40,000 square metres of office space. Again, we have to take into account the commitments, what's already got planning permission, and approximately 100 hectares have planning permission already. That includes sites such as land at Red Brick Farm, an extension to the Eastern Industries area for approximately 30 hectares. So as been mentioned, all the sites that were suggested to us have been through a very detailed site assessment process with a wide-ranging criteria. A site assessment, or draft site assessment methodology report was published as part of the earlier consultation and sets out all the different varying criteria. We've used a colour-based approach to identify where there's issues and risks and what could things that would need to be mitigated on any site. As well as being desk-based GIS assessment of distances to different criteria, it's also included professional assessment from other departments. So we have the council's transport team, natural environment team, historic environment, the education department and public health have all commented to take into account their views and ensure they're taken into consideration when we're selecting sites. And we've also sent the list of sites and had responses from statutory bodies such as Natural England and Historic England as well. There's a huge wide-ranging assessment criteria, but some criteria are considered major and are more or less rule sites out of being suitable for future development. Some of those are things such as, are they in areas that are safeguarded or for future minerals and waste consultation, for minerals and waste use? Are they in areas of flood risk, particularly for housing, which the sequential test has to be applied to ensure that the sites at lower risk of flood risk are used first. For employment is classified as less vulnerable, and therefore some development can take place in lower flood risk areas. Also, we've got proximity to hazardous apparatus. That could be things like gas compressor stations or gas pipelines, and also proximity to nationally important habitats. Not this time, but in previous local plan preparation, we have actually had sites that have been suggested that are on top of nature reserves that can't come forward for obvious reasons. So any site that scores red against any of these criteria are ruled out at the first sieve, and then the rest of the sites are then reviewed to select the most suitable, sustainable and developable sites. This does mean that, taking this into account, that quite a lot of the authority area to the east is in flood zone, and this means that there's limited opportunities for growth in areas such as Thorney and Newborough, and wouldn't be suitable for housing. So this map here shows the preferred sites that have been suggested, proposed that's been suggested in the draft local plan. This does include a number of, urban extensions. So we've got existing urban extensions at Great Haddon, some land at the showground and additional land beyond what is in the current local plan and additional to the planning applications. It does include land at Norwood, which is an existing local plan allocation. As well as that, there is 2 new settlements. We have land south of Market Deeping, which is proposed for approximately 1,055 dwellings, and then land to the north of Castor and Aylesworth. My mouse has disappeared now. Castor and Aylesworth here, which is for approximately 3,000 dwellings in total, but 1,800 deliverable during the plan period. And most of the growth has been concentrated in the urban area and city centre, particularly brownfield sites in the city centre. And there is also growth in some of the villages, including sites in Glinton, Helpston and Barnack and Wittering, as well as a small site in Bainton as well. So this table sets out the proportion and the growth distribution as part of our growth strategy. So as I said, most of the growth is either within the existing urban area or within urban extensions. 13% is proposed to the 2 new settlements, and 6% is within villages. We've also made an allowance for windfall sites, which are sites that are not known about at the moment that come forward. That can be 1 or 2 dwellings, infill development, or sites that become available during the 20-year plan period that weren't known at this stage. and we have evidence to justify that rate and can demonstrate how that could be achieved. So just go through some of the sites I have mentioned as going through the map, but we have, for urban extensions, we have the committed sites that are most of them are under construction, being built. We have existing local plan allocations where there's planning applications and some have been determined. And then there's additional land proposed at the East of England Showground, totalling 4,070 dwellings. There's the two new urban extensions that I mentioned that will deliver, so that's 1,800 dwellings at Castor and Ellsworth and 1,005 at Market Deeping Bridge during the plan period. And then for employment land, the requirements are made up from sites. We have a proposed strategic employment allocation north of Stanground. There's additional development of Palmwell Way, other sites, and also 7 hectares as part of the mixed-use scheme urban extension at Castor and Ellsworth. So that's just a bit of background for you. Now I'd just like to say about what's going to happen next with the public consultation. So it's currently proposed, subject to approval here, that the plan will go out for public consultation between the 11th of April and 29th of May. That's for 7 weeks. To make sure as many people as possible can comment, there will be the full PDF version of the plan and all the detail available on the website. We've also created an online interactive story map, which is a summary of the plan, which people can zoom in and click on sites or different areas and see how the policies correspond with the map. There's also a very short summary leaflet that we'll have copies available and be sent out to parish councils and also to put in local libraries. And if anyone would like to see a hard copy of the plan, there'll be available a copy at the town hall and also in local libraries. We want to also make it as easy as possible for people to make comments, so there'll be an online form people can email in. They can download the form as well, and there'll be paper copies available at local libraries that can be posted into the council as well. So that's just a very quick summary of where we're at, if anyone has any questions at this stage.
Thank you, Gemma. I'm pleased to advise that Mr. Martin Chilcott has joined us today, and he would like to address Cabinet. Mr. Chilcott, if you... Oh, I do beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon. I'm jumping the gun. Sit there. By all means, come up. Are there any questions for Gemma? It's not. For the sorry, it's not in there. Just advise me. It's not in the.
I think you could usefully see if there are any questions on Gemma's presentation at this point, but not debate.
Yes.
Gemma could also.
I beg your pardon. Questions for clarification.
And one of those might be, could you tell us about?
Yeah, I should have added at the end of my presentation just to give you an update from Planning Committee as well. So this item was presented to Planning Committee on Tuesday, and the minutes from that meeting have been circulated so people can see some of the discussions that were taking place. This did include presentations by members of the public, where they set out some of their concerns about the document, including evidence base not being published at this stage. Lack of justification for the end date of the plan to 2044, concerns about viability of some of the sites, concerns about employment land being proposed in the Green Wedge, traffic impacts, particularly around Eye and leading into Peterborough, and the cumulative impact on infrastructure. During the debate, there was a few questions that were raised, asking about the level of engagement with business sector. Questions about the new policy about houses in multiple occupation, which there was concerns about how this would affect car parking, whether this could be sufficiently used to stop this type of development in areas where there's an over-concentration. The consideration of health impacts, what's the impact of the government's proposed devolution deal, and then a need for policies that protect the increase of adult gaming centres. So that was the main summary.
Thank you, Gemma. My apologies. Your bits are in italic, my bits are in bold, and I didn't read the bits in italic. My bad. Thank you very much indeed. Cabinet, are there any questions, not debate, any questions for clarification from Gemma? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, or Leader, sorry, through you. I just wanted to ask, school transport is a bit of a hot topic in terms of financing and ensuring that children are able to access schools safely, cycle routes, those sorts of things. has that been guided by government, or has that been taken into account to ensure that school places, access to schools has been considered as this has been developed?
Yes, and so there's in the assessment criteria, it's about access to schools. So where's the nearest school? What's the capacity at the nearest school? As something that's been taken into consideration, and also comments from the education department. We've reviewed the latest school organisation plan, and as well as just whether there's capacity at the school, it's also the capacity for the school to perhaps expand in the future as well has been considered.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. Gemma, just give us an idea, because there's always land that people apply for planning permission but then do nothing with. How much residual, I'll call it residual land, do we have? And what do we do to make sure that people, you know, who've got planning permission actually then build on it? Because I suppose it does affect your figures as well.
Yes, and that's perhaps a point I should have made in the presentation as well, sorry. The local plan has a minimum target of 20,120, and we've actually allocated land slightly over that. So there's a buffer of around about 10%. So we're allocating additional sites to that to take account of the fact that, yes, some of this development may not come forward. And we have good monitoring data going back sort of 20, 25 years to show the rate of lapse rates of different sites. So we can justify why we've included that buffer to take account of that. And also, yes, some sites just don't come forward, and that's things that perhaps have to be looked at, and what the reasons are for those, and that's other work that we'll look at doing, and we could perhaps say about looking about infrastructure and how to support and fund to make sure the sites are delivered.
Thank you, Councillor Gemma. Thank you, Gemma. Any further questions for Gemma before I introduce Mr. Martin Chilcott? Martin, you've kindly agreed to address Cabinet for us. You have 3 minutes. Thanks for joining us. Do you know how the mic works? Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. I'm Martin Chilcott. I am Chair of Protect Rural Peterborough, a campaign group set up in 2016 for the first time that this site, well, actually it was the third time in 40 years that this site had been put forward. So this does feel a bit like Groundhog Day. I'm going to talk to you in 3 minutes, hopefully, about we think it's there's a wrong process, wrong growth, and the wrong site, in particular of Castor. Wrong process because, as councillors, members of the Cabinet, you don't have sight of the site evidence report, the growth evidence report, or the local plan sustainability report. That report sets out the way in which policies and sites have been looked at and the options for those. So you haven't got that evidence. At Planning Committee, I also brought to the attention, I'm very welcome Councillor Thorburn's interaction, which is actually scrutiny now happens and after that Cabinet, which seems like a very, very good thing to do. But the documents remain. You don't know what's in them, and the first time you're going to find that out is when members of the public are going to find out. So you haven't got anything to say other than this is what we want to do. Talking of public consultation in terms of the wrong growth, that consultation issues an option. This draft local plan goes against about 5 or 6 major points that were public response on settlement hierarchy, growth options, policies on countryside, settlement boundaries, and also John Clare countryside. By the way, there are 2 buffers in this on numbers as well. There's the buffer of 2 extra years, that's 2,000, and there's the buffer, as Gemma mentioned, in terms of contingency of 10%. By the way, because of over-delivery, that only should be 5%. So previous over-delivery by the council. In terms of the wrong site, Daniel agreed to circulate a map which will show you that this is a very, very challenging site at Castor and Aylesworth. The figure's being banded around £100 million on infrastructure to make it viable for private developers. And what will they build? They'll probably build nice posh houses near Castor, because that's where they'll make their money. 4 or 5 bedrooms. You've got the Castor Hanglands, a nationally important nature site, and unless there's a 1 kilometre exclusion zone around it, which will eat into the land, then that will be destroyed. This morning, Wildlife Trust posted on BBC about that. It trashes the Hanglands. The whole area is littered with archaeology. There's a high-pressure gas pipeline that runs right through the middle of it, which takes out a huge swathe of the land available, and we can't see how Homes England are going to access that site. So there's huge problems with it, not least the fact that flood, and bear in mind we are here about 20 feet above sea level where we're currently sitting. We're about 25, 30 feet above sea level. So if you put a township on the top of a limestone plateau, 25 metres above a village, where's the water going to go? And then finally, I just want to alert you to risks. You've got risks of going forward on consultation with this draft local plan. There's the evidence risk, because you don't know what's in those reports. There's the consultation risk, because the consultation's already been compromised or disrespected in those aspects. There's a site risk, and I would ask, is it best to spend £100 million of public money on making it viable for private developers to build posh houses near Castor, or should that 100 million be focused on the regeneration, a desperate regeneration? I don't think anybody in this room would disagree, the desperate need for regeneration in the city, urban area and surrounds.
Thank you, Mr Chilcott, and that's an excellent place to pause. Given Councillor Thorburns' suggestion to adjourn the meeting, this meeting to allow the views of tonight's joint scrutiny also to be heard and included within our deliberations. I propose that we adjourn this meeting until Monday, the 24th of March. Sorry, this item. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Cahill is fine. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Cahill. Members, are we agreed? And then we move to the next item. Thank you very much indeed.
Leader, could I just check something? Do I come back on Monday for questions on what I've just done?
No, I think that...
There's no provision for questions for speakers. Thank you.
There's no provision.
Okay.
No. Okay.
Fine,
Thanks,
thank you.
Martin.
Thank you
Cheers.
very much for sparing me the time. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Members, item 4 on pages 199 to 206 of the agenda is the Household Support Fund Phase 7 approval. The information within this report was under embargo by the Department of Work and Pensions until midnight yesterday. Following the passing of the deadline, the report was published fully on the Council's website. I'll now invite Councillor Alison Jones, Cabinet Member for Housing and Communities. Will you be kind enough to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Leader. The cost of living remains a key problem for many people in our communities as low-income households struggle to meet their day-to-day costs and pay their bills. Financial problems affect people both in and out of work and are often made more challenging for single-parent families, households where English is spoken as a second language, or households where there has been a sudden change, for example, a loss of a sudden health condition. Through the Housing Support Fund, we are able to provide urgent and emergency support to help households through times of crisis, alongside advice and signposting to prevent longer-term issues from occurring. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Members, now we will move to questions. Anybody, any questions on this paper? Excuse me. Yep, Councillor Cairn, you have a comment.
Yeah, I just really wanted to praise the diversity, actually, of all of the various organisations that will be delivering on this. And when you look at the EDI aspect, you have organisations representative of age, representative of faith groups, religious groups, and particularly in my ward we have Kingsgate Community Church, who offer Care Zone, the food bank, advice, and they really are. I think that this will be really welcome to them. I really like to thank you, Councillor Jones, for overseeing this, and I think that that's worth mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cairn. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move to debate.
Comment. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cairn. What's also of benefit is that because we've been doing this for a few years, we've been able to develop those relationships to make sure that the money that we've got is targeting the right, like you said, the diverse people and groups that we need in the city. So that's what's built up over the years. So it's good. Thank you very much.
Point made and taken. Thank you very much. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader, and it's a comment really. So I'm really happy that we're getting this additional funding that is continuing. I made it clear last night that this administration is for supporting vulnerable families and children, and I'm glad that the extension of this funding is going to enable families to access food vouchers during the holidays. So thank you, Councillor Jones, for overseeing this.
Thank you, Lynette. Do you want to come back on that? Are you okay?
I think that's fine, to be honest.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other further questions or comments? All I will add, it's a far cry from, excuse me, October and December 2020 when we were organising food and books for children from the half-term holidays out of our own pockets. So I'm absolutely delighted to see this next iteration of the Household Support Fund. On that basis, if there are no further questions, Cabinet is recommended to approve the overall approach to the delivery of the Household Support Fund extension as outlined in this report, excuse me, delegate authority to the Executive Director for Place and Economy to finalise the detailed arrangements, including the award of agreements and contracts for all aspects of the Household Support Fund Round 7, with within the guideline scheme up to £3.22 million being the grant determination limit as set out by the government's financial instruction. And 3, delegate authority to the Executive Director for Place and Economy where the government extends a household support fund beyond the 31st of March 2026 to enter or extend appropriate agreements and contracts up to the future grant determination limit and in accordance with the government's guidelines. Members, are we agreed? Excellent, thank you.